Have you ever thought about how characteristics are passed down from one generation to the next? I mean, look at these people. All of them are actors from Hollywood. None of them are related. And they don't look a darn thing like one another. Chapter 13 talks about how information is passed on from generation to generation. These are in the form of things called genes, and they're parts of DNA. If you notice here, 13.1, we're going to talk, it's just a few minutes long, about how offspring acquire genes from parents by inheriting chromosomes from them. Then we're going to get into a little bit more information on meiosis and fertilization. There's this concept called alteration of generations. And then 13.3 will really get into the nuts and bolts of meiosis. Make sure you don't spend any time on 13.4. We're told that we don't need to teach that. Make sure that by the end of this little segment that you're able to answer both of these objectives. How traits are inherited from parents to offspring, and make sure that you're able to distinguish between sexual and asexual reproduction. But first, let's answer this question together. Which of the following transmits genes from one generation of a family to another? Which transmits genes? Got an answer? We'll talk about it tomorrow. Genetics, as we talked about at the beginning of chapter 12, is the study of heredity and variation, and how that is passed on from one generation to the next. This variation is demonstrated by the differences in offspring, and you can see them. See these three kids here, if this was a real family, and think about your own family. No one looks the same as their parent or parents. There's always a little bit of difference there in the genetic variation, and that's important. And we'll talk about that later, how we have evolved to have that variation or difference due to evolution. But genes, let's define what they are. Here we have a chromosome, this long purple thing, and it's a unit of heredity that actually does something. It says something. It causes something to be made or created within the offspring. We have very few genes. We only have, science believes now, about 23,000 genes. Most of our DNA actually doesn't code for anything. And so I want you to look at this long chromosome and just imagine maybe 100 or 200 genes on there. Like in this case, it looks like that we're looking at something called an allele for purple flowers. It's just a message that says, hey, flower, become purple or become white. Now these genes are passed on to the next generation through reproductive cells called gametes. Gametes is another vocabulary word that you need to know. You can see here an egg with a sperm penetrating it. Each gene is very specific as to where it is. My gene for eye color is going to be on a certain chromosome, and it's going to be in the same exact spot as your gene for eye color. So in humans, that the specificity of gene location is conserved, which just means it's the same for all of us, or none of this would work. There are some individuals out there in nature that actually reproduce asexually, and this is really creating of clones. Here we have a hydra, and he's just budding off. And there's a lot of plants that do this. Starfish can do this. What it means is that all of the cells in the new individual will be the exact copies of the parent. And so this is cloning. This isn't mixing up of genes. And there are advantages to this, like quick regeneration times. You don't have to have sex. You don't have to incubate a baby. But the problem here is that the offspring is exactly the same as the parent. And if conditions change in the hydra's environment, that offspring may not be well adapted to the new conditions, like the unavailability of a vitamin or a virus that comes into that environment. That new hydra baby may have trouble, whereas for multicellular organisms like us that do sexual reproduction, we have a whole variety of individuals, many who are well adapted if the environment would change, and many who aren't, and they'll just die off. I know it sounds cold, but variation is important, and meiosis, this whole process of creating these mixtures of all these genes, is important for that reason. the way this works is that two parents will give rise to offspring that have unique combinations of genes inherited from the two parents, and these combinations of genes will never be seen before or ever again in nature. It's pretty remarkable to think about. Make sure that you spend a little bit of time answering these objectives.